Chapter 21. It really wasn't me. I didn't. It was Brian. Fitch was aghast and loudly protested his innocence. Papa! Another two slaps. Fitch's cheeks were now puffed up. Fanny stared at Fitch in a towering rage as she bit off her words. How dare you make excuses? Brian is such an honest person. How could he have committed such a foul act? It must have been you. Brian was at a loss for words as he gloated inwardly. He hastily painted a picture of honest innocence on his face as he looked at Fitch and Fanny. He smiled dully. What's wrong, Master Fanny? It really wasn't me. Fitch was suddenly the most wronged man in the world as he clutched his cheeks and protested loudly. Stop lying. Get out. Now. Fanny wore an expression of exasperation that iron wouldn't improve and become steel, Chinese expression of wishing someone would improve, and replied heatedly. Fitch's face was sore and saw that Fanny was ready to erupt with rage at any moment. He knew that any explanation would be of no use and was deathly afraid that Fanny would strike out again if he sent her up the wall. He smiled bitterly and nodded, heading outside the training fields with a face full of dejection. When he passed by Brian, Fitch paused and glared at Han Shao viciously for a few moments, gritting his teeth and saying softly, "Bastard." Han Shao pretended complete innocence of Fitch's hate and even smiled honestly at him in a friendly, kind gesture. How come you suddenly got fat? Fitch was infuriated and he turned his face away in resentment after glaring at Han Shao one more time. He quickly bypassed the obstacles in his way and disappeared outside the door in a blink of an eye. Brian, what are you doing here? Master Fanny's anger abated as soon as Fitch left and she posed a question to Han Shao. Cleaning. Han Shao went to do his own thing in the corner of the training field. He picked up a broom and prepared to clean up the area a bit to get it ready for a subsequent round of necromancy students. Oh, I see. Oh right, how's your back feeling? When your injuries have healed, I want to take a close look at what's going on with you. It's incredible that an agony of the soul magic could allow you to gain mental strength. Fanny was quite affable when faced with Han Shao, conversing with him peacefully and helping him clean up the obstacles on the ground with no haughty attitude at all. Much better. Oh right, Master Fanny, can you not tell the school authorities what happened last night? Han Shao absent-mindedly swept up broken bones and dust and took a sniff of the right hand that had touched Fanny's butt when he had a moment. A faint delicate fragrance emanated from the fingers of his right hand, making his heart lurch. His eyes immediately gazed strangely at Fanny's pert butt, which happened to be not too far away. Fanny's back arched slightly when she bent down to clear the obstacles, further accentuating the mesmerizing curve of her butt. It was as if it contained a hypnotizing power of temptation. Fanny was a bit startled by Han Shao's words and quickly straightened her lithe body. She turned to look at Han Shao and asked in astonishment, "Why, Brian, you're not concentrating, you're stepping on the broom." He hadn't expected Fanny to abruptly turn around. Han Shao had a guilty conscience and hastily moved his foot off the broom, smiling dumbly afterwards. Carrie and Borg are actually good people. If you tell the school authorities what happened, they'll be fired. Life will be difficult if their families don't have the silver they earn anymore. Fanny gazed at Han Shao in amazement and slightly crooked a dainty eyebrow. She smiled after a moment and said, "Brian, you're always so kind. You speak on their behalf even after they've bullied you." "All right, I'll forget it, since even you, the victim, pleads so. I won't put them in a difficult place. You're the key to my experiments. Remember to tell me if anyone bullies you in the future." Kind. Han Shao was at a loss of words internally. Sure, what he was doing now was kind, otherwise he wouldn't have the opportunity to blackmail Carrie and Borg into doing his duties. If the two of them left, then everything would fall on him and Jack's shoulders. Who would give a crap about what happened to the latter? As Han Shao was thinking his random thoughts, Fanny looked at Han Shao suspiciously and spoke again. "Brian, I don't think you're that crazy. Otherwise how could you say what you've just said?" Momentarily dumbfounded, Han Shao's heart skipped a beat. He hastily scratched his head and replied with some embarrassment, "Hey, I sometimes feel like my mind is dull and foggy. I don't know what I do after that." "I see. Looks like there are some negative after effects of the agony of the soul on your body. Carrie. And don't worry, I'll give you a close inspection when your back heals. I'll definitely cure all your weird ailments. It's almost time for me to lead students in the next round of experiments. I'm going to get back and get ready. You can clean up the rest. Fanny chanted an incantation after speaking to Han-Sha-Oh, sending the zombie warriors in the training field back to the other dimension and then left in a whirl. Soon after Fanny had left, Han-Sha-Oh left the ruins in the training field and left to find Carrie and Borg as well. He dictated arrogantly to them, "Don't worry, I've already taken care of your business. The two of you can now go clean up the training field." Carrie and Borg was happily astonished and ran off willy-nilly with mops and brooms, overjoyed to mop up behind Han-Sha-Oh after showering a round of gratitude on him. Han-Sha-Oh had no pressing things to do after leaving the training field. He became curious about the contents of the jade box after recalling the events of yesterday and truly wanted to learn what the ball was. There was no way that he could ask anyone else about this, and thus decided to head to the Dark Major Library to see if there were any records of the ball. Each major had its own individual library within the Babylon Academy of Magic. The range of topics contained within the books of each library were exceedingly diverse and held all the wisdom and descriptions of the major's collective knowledge bank. Generally speaking, libraries were not open to the public and there were strict regulations regarding access for students from other majors. Using Jack's cleaning duties as an excuse, Han-Sha-Oh swaggered into the Dark Major Library with a brush in hand. "Brian, what are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be cleaning the training field at this time?" Little fatty Jack was putting books away and was startled into a soft question when he saw Han-Sha-Oh walk in with a brush. Hey, Carrie and Borg, those two idiots will be the ones cleaning up the training field in the future. I'm here on serious business today." Han-Sha-Oh smiled and picked up a random book in a relaxed manner. He glanced at it and put it back after realizing that it was a book on the foundational basics of dark magic. "Carrie and Borg are cleaning the training field for you. How is that possible? Is it because they're scared of you after the beating in the training field yesterday?" Little fatty Jack had an expression of astonishment, but then remembered Han-Sha-Oh's performance yesterday and looked at him with a bit of fear. "Oh right, Brian, what happened to you yesterday? You seemed like a different person. Even though we're really close, even I was really afraid of you yesterday." Han-Sha-Oh laughed lightly as he put one hand on Jack's shoulder. "That depends on who. If someone is making life difficult for me, I won't let him have an easy one either. Hey, with our relationship there's no way that I would beat you up." "Oh right, Jack, where are the books regarding magical items in the Dark Major Library?" Second bookcase in the back." "Why do you ask?" Jack pointed behind Han-Sha-Oh and asked in confusion. "Nothing much, helping you clean?" Han-Sha-Oh smiled and walked towards the bookcase of magical item references. "But Brian, I've already dusted off that bookcase." "Then I'll dust it off again for you." When he reached the appropriate bookcase, Han-Sha-Oh started from the last row and started flipping through a book, carelessly throwing his brush to the side. When he had been observing the jade box last night, Han-Sha-Oh's mental strength flowed curiously to the ball inside. This allowed him to vaguely sense the magical currents within the ball. The Han-Sha-Oh of now wasn't a complete rookie when it came to magical knowledge and naturally understood that magical currents indicated that the ball was some kind of magical object. This was why he came searching for the ball's origins within the library. Unfortunately, Han-Sha-Oh realized after perusing most of the books on magical items that these contained only simple descriptions of ordinary magical staffs, robes and jewelry. It wasn't what he wanted. He cleaned up the bookcase with some dejection and resignation, no longer holding out hope for answers here. He then moved to the bookcases holding books on necromancy. Since he had made his way to the library, he couldn't very well leave empty-handed. He should bring at least one book back for further study, Han-Sha-Oh mused as he started browsing through the books. The books at the top of the bookcases dealt with higher-level magic. He wouldn't understand them even if he took them home. Therefore he turned his attention to the lower level. A book of the description of dark creatures caught his eye. He flipped through a few pages and discovered that it recorded some of the particulars of summoning dark creatures. Happy at heart, Han-Sha-Oh immediately went to find Jack and waved the description of dark creatures at Jack. He chuckled, "Jack, I'm taking this book back for further study. Cover for me, don't let other people find out." He didn't wait for Jack to respond and happily stuffed the book into his clothes, grabbed the brush he'd discarded earlier and left the library. Chapter 22, earned some spending money. Time flew. Half a month had passed by in a blink of an eye. This half of a month was one of the most relaxing periods of time that Han Shao had ever had. The cleaning duties that had originally belonged to him were taken care of by Borg and Carrie. And because Han Shao's back was injured, Fanny didn't come looking for him to conduct more research. Han Shao learned from Jeff that even Fitch had gone in again to give the Adept Mage qualification trials another go. Therefore this major enemy was temporarily not a threat. Ever since Han Shao's shameless confession of love at the bottom of the trap, Lisa's attitude towards Han Shao had undergone a drastic change. Not only did she not pick on Han Shao anymore, but she often protected him, forbidding other students to practice necromancy magic on him. Given the situation, apart from eating, sleeping, drinking and showering, Han Shao spent all the rest of his free time on practicing magic and studying the foundations of necromancy and the descriptions of dark creatures. To be honest, the injuries on Han Shao's back had long since healed thanks to him practicing magic. There wasn't even a scar left anymore. The current Han Shao had grown another 2 centimeters and was now 170 centimeters. Thanks to practicing magic and sufficient nutrition from rations his previous week, beyond belief body had started to slowly firm up and increase in strength. There were even muscles forming on his chest and arms. Unbeknownst to anyone else, Han Shao's body and strength had slowly changed without anyone knowing. He had also progressed to the crucial point of training for the mystical glacial spell fire. When Han Shao circulated his magical yuan, he could proceed according to the spell's instructions and bring his magical yuan to the palms of his hands. Whenever Han Shao started up the mystical glacial spell fire and circulated his magical yuan to his left and right palm, he could feel that the cinder of his palms respectively turned glacially cold and searingly hot. The surface of his skin would be tinged faint purple and red, causing the center of his hands to look quite odd. Han Shao didn't dare do anything rash with the weird jade box in the meantime. He was deathly afraid that last time's situation would happen again. He was temporarily unwilling to take that kind of risk again before he got a handle on what the round ball was and its purpose. Thanks to studying the descriptions of dark creatures over the past 2 weeks, Han Shao had a much clearer understanding of the particulars of summoning specific dark creatures. He also understood how to communicate with them and how to send them back to the other dimension. However, even though the incantation for sending a summoned dark creature back to the other dimension was recorded in the description of dark creatures, and Han Shao believed that he was absolutely capable of doing so with his current level of mental strength, he didn't dare take action. This was because he wasn't sure if he could summon the little skeleton again if he sent it back to the other dimension. The black skeleton with 7 bone spurs was the result of Han Shao's painstaking refinement according to the methods of refining a demonic treasure. Not only was it superior in all aspects to ordinary skeletons, but it had a scary immunity to light magic. Han Shao had spent his days and nights with the little skeleton during this time. It had also helped Han Shao greatly, causing Han Shao to grow attached to it. He was worried that if he sent it to the other dimension, he would lose it forever if he was unable to summon it next time. It was because of this concern that although Han Shao was confident he would be able to send it back to the other dimension, he still hesitated to do so. He'd rather have the little skeleton live under his bed, resolutely keeping it even when that meant running the risk of discovery by others. The little black skeleton was lazily lying in a wooden bucket, its bones as black as ink and glowing with a faint haze. In the past 2 weeks, Han Shao had often injected magical yuan into the bucket, continuing to refine it according to the magical yin concentration matrix. Under Han Shao's continual refinement, the little skeleton's body became more and more agile and strong. Its bone dagger was actually even stronger than ordinary knives and swords. Han Shao had once experimented with a piece of broken bone and discovered that the broken bone had been immediately cut in half when the bone dagger had sliced down. As the little skeleton underwent changes, so did Han Shao benefit from training in the solid realm. His body also received a mysterious makeover. The only thing was Han Shao had still been unable to break through this demonic realm level. He carefully went through old Far Chu Kang Len's memories, adding some of his reflections on what had happened recently, and came to one conclusion: If he wanted to quickly reach perfection in the solid realm, breaking things was the most effective and efficient way. Whenever Han Shao had been severely beaten or suffered injuries on his body would quickly repair itself through magic training. And every time after recovery his body would be more stronger than before. His skin and bones would be more resilient. It was only after damage and injury that his progress in the solid realm would pick up. When he thought through this point, Han Shao gave an involuntary ironic smile. This kind of magic training was death by masochism. But since he had started on this path, he had to find a way to quickly break through the solid realm in order to gain more strength and power. On this day, Han Shao's figure appeared at the doors of the martial arts school of the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force. After a few days of gathering information, Han Shao understood that a place for cultivating warriors and knights existed within this school. However, the warriors and knights were trained separately. The ranks of the warrior students were mostly filled with commoners. Their training mostly consisted of practicing their fighting aura and being instilled with notions of loyalty to their liege. The students within the school of knights mostly came from noble families and was a training field for the powerful families and military forces as well as the royal sons of the empire. These students hailed from uncommon origins and had varying degrees of influence within their families. Not only did they practice their fighting aura, but they were also here to learn the manners and graces of the nobility, strategies of war and art of command. These students absorbed a variety of knowledge within the school of knights, all for the purpose of obtaining a good opportunity in the future, whether in their family or within the empire. The families of these knight students were all rather wealthy and on the path of becoming a senior knight did not bat an eye, spending money to hire a few commoners for use in practicing battle and martial arts techniques. A few commoners who felt they possessed tough bodies would take the pummeling in return for money and rich rewards. Even a few warrior students would become willing human targets in return for money. However, it wasn't an easy task to earn this money. Knight students would sometimes miscalculate and even beat a few human targets to death. But because this was a mutually agreed, both sides willing transaction that the knight students had paid for, no one cared if the human targets were beaten to death. They were asking for it after all. Han Shao had come here to become one of the human targets. But he wasn't in it for the money. He wanted to temper his body in order to break through the solid realm. Numerous human targets stood within a spacious lobby. Each was strong and fit, all wearing the grubby clothing of poor commoners. Han Shao concentrated his attention for a moment and discovered some warrior students mixed into the crowd. Some had been drawn in by the academy's reputation and some were students from the warrior school. "You're an errand boy for the academy, but your body isn't very strong and you're not a warrior. You're asking for death coming here. Little fellow, let me advise you to avoid pursuing this pay, otherwise you could really be beaten to death," a thin old man said to Han Shao as he looked over from the doors at the front of the lobby. Old man Jeff was 50-some years old and in the same occupation as Han Shao. He wore an errand boy's clothes and was in charge of registering the human targets. He had some misgivings about the frailty of Han Shao's body and so tried to persuade Han Shao out of kindness. "No worries, Mr. Jeff, please register me. I'd like to try." Han Shao looked at Jeff and spoke sincerely. "Since you insist, I'll register you." Do you think this is easy money? If you really are beaten to death, don't blame me for not warning you." Upon seeing Han Shao was still insistent after a few attempts and that others behind in the line were impatiently calling out, Jeff gave up trying to convince Han Shao and agreed putting down Brian in the register. A few other human targets looked at him oddly when Han Shao walked in through the doors. The eyes of most were filled with disdain and the kind-hearted few wore expressions of pity and regret, even trying to convince Han Shao not to try. Although Han Shao's body was a bit stronger than before due to practicing magic, he was still quite a ways off from the burly men whose arms were thicker than his thighs. Brian had been all skin and bones like a skinny monkey and Han Shao was only marginally stronger in comparison. "Listen to me, leave while you still can, otherwise you'll surely be beaten to death." As Han Shao took in his surroundings, a thin 20-some-year-old youth walked over to Han Shao and tried to persuade him. This youth wore the clothes of a warrior student. Even though his body didn't look too well built either, he was undoubtedly much stronger than those who looked strong on the outside but hadn't practiced any martial arts techniques simply because he was a warrior student. thank you, I want to try. Han Shao flashed a friendly smile and spoke lightly as he nodded at the youth. I'm called Cal and I come here often to earn some extra money. Even though I'm a sergeant knight, I've still suffered serious injuries before. I've seen too many who were beaten to death because they wanted to earn some money, so I hope you can take my advice. Leave while you still can, otherwise you'll truly regret it. Cal looked at Han Shao with sincerity, dissuading Han Shao with a face of genuity. Han Shu smiled and shook his head. I'm called Brian. Very nice to meet you, California. I'm grateful for your good intentions, but I must try. Cal gave an involuntary sigh upon seeing Han Shao's determination and shook his head without saying anything. Cal's gaze, however, was full of pity, as if he felt that Han Shao was surely dead without a doubt. Chapter 23. This kid's a bit strong. Alright, our noble future knights are coming this way. Good luck. Jeff suddenly yelled loudly as Han Shao and Cal were talking. More than 10 colorfully dressed knight students wearing exquisite swords walked in through the lobby doors following Jeff's announcement. Most of them were teenage boys with an exceedingly few amount of young girls. They cast arrogant looks and judgment, sizing up the human targets in the lobby. The warriors in the lobby were the first to be noticed. These guys had much more strength than the average person and would be the most beneficial in terms of real combat experience. They were thus, naturally, the first to draw attention. The group of warriors that Cal headed up were the first to be targeted by the students. As the crowd of students haggled over an acceptable price, the group of warriors were led away for practice at the training field. Cal was one of them, and he cast a regretful glance from afar at Han Shao as he left. Warriors were the strongest out of all the human targets and the most useful for knight students in terms of actual combat practice. If knight students wished to hire them, then the amount they would have to pay would naturally be far above that of ordinary burly commoner. After the warrior, human targets who had been mixed throughout the lobby had been hired away as first pick. Those remaining were all commoners. Of those, the ones who were brawny and stocky became the first to be selected. Some flexed their huge muscles, showing off bodybuilding poses that screamed, I'm so strong, my muscles are awesome. They wore fawning smiles as they looked at the future knights, hoping to be selected and receive rich compensation in return. Han Shao's body was unremarkable to begin with, and being completely obscured by a crowd of tall and strong muscle men, he was taken even less seriously. Han Shao started to become secretly anxious as he saw the knight students pick their targets and leave one by one. The 3 muscle men next to him were standing in 3 different directions, almost completely covering him. The knight students probably couldn't even see him. As Han Shao fretted, he also tried to find a way to stand out. Hi big guy, excuse me. Han Shao patted the 2-meter mountain of flesh ahead of him and flashed a friendly smile. The brawny man's skin was copper-colored and his back was a sturdy frame. Muscles rippled through his 2-meter tall height like a bodybuilder who Han Shao had seen before. When he heard Han Shao speak, the man turned around and glared at Han Shao with a vicious look. His right bicep muscle abruptly curled and tensed, forming a small mountain of flesh. He then laughed coldly in pride and turned his head without another word. What if you have big muscles? Han Shao also gave a cold laugh internally and reached out with his left hand. He placed it on the man's waist and suddenly pushed forward hard. Don don don. The big muscle man stumbled and staggered forward 3 steps, following the inrush of the force from Han Shao's strong push. The lobby was already extremely crowded thanks to the presence of many mountains of flesh. People around him were shoved against their will when this person suddenly came crashing in. The area in front of Han Shao immediately became quite chaotic. Damn it, Daniel, do you want to break the rules? The other mountains of flesh that had been body slammed by the mountain of flesh called Daniel roared furiously after steadying himself. It wasn't me. It was the kid behind me. Daniel protested his innocence to the burly man beside him and immediately glared at Han Shao ferociously, saying coldly, kid, do you want to die early? At this moment Han Shao had already taken advantage of the situation to slip out and occupy one of the better positions on the other side of the lobby. Upon hearing Daniel's words, Han Shao gave a cold laugh and also stretched out his right hand, making the same bodybuilding pose that Daniel had just made. He flexed his biceps and made an I'm so strong gesture, cocking an eyebrow and gazing at Daniel provocatively. A few additional knight students walked in suddenly and was about to pick the human targets in the back. They all halted their motions of hiring and looked over in interest when they realized that there seemed to be something interesting going on. Han Shao Sha-Oh had arrogantly struck such an outrageous pose because he had seen these new night students walk in. Based on Han Sha-Oh's body condition, it would be a bit difficult to be chosen out of the crowd. Trying to gain attention with his body and self-boasting would also most likely not amount to much. The fastest shortcut was to use tyrannical strength to rout a mountain of flesh. Only then would the night students change their minds about him. Except even though Han Sha-Oh had struck a cocky provocative pose, he was still an idiot in the eyes of others. If a mountain of flesh like Daniel had made such a gesture, it would have nationally been quite intimidating. But when a 170 centimeters tall and thin Han Sha-Oh strutted arrogantly amongst so many mountains of flesh, one could only say, "Ridiculous, courting death." "Ha kid, since you seek death I'll send you on your way." Daniel did not immediately erupt into a full-blown rage when faced with Han Sha-Oh's provocation, but was rather delighted. He laughed loudly, raised an arm thicker than Han Sha-Oh's thigh and grabbed for Han Sha-Oh. In the lobby, fights often broke out between human targets seeking to distinguish themselves and attract the attentions of a rich and powerful night student. This was a common sight. Daniel was naturally happy instead of angry when he saw that Han Sha-Oh's reckless provocation was playing right into his plans. He would be able to use this kid to prove his aggressiveness and ferocity in front of the night students. Except muscular and fierce people were usually all brawn and no brains. Daniel had given no thought to how much strength Han Sha-Oh would have needed with his body condition in order to push Daniel forcefully from the piles of flesh and even cause those he'd crashed into to stagger as well. The errand boy in charge of registering names, Jeff, couldn't bear to see Daniel reach toward Han Sha-Oh and called out involuntarily, "Daniel, he's an errand boy for the students. You can't harm him." "Seriously, I will." Daniel smiled in response and didn't slow his right hand, still going towards Han Sha-Oh. A few human targets with good intentions and some of the kinder night students winced in anticipation. Some of the young female night students even screamed in fear. Just as Daniel's meaty hand was about to fall upon Han Sha-Oh's head, Han Sha-Oh's body suddenly shifted from the position he had been standing in, causing Daniel's incoming hand to grasp at this air. Han Sha-Oh also laughed weirdly at this moment, as if mocking Daniel's incompetence. He stuck out his left arm again and curled his left bicep with the same posture. His right finger pointed at the small muscle that had flexed on his bicep and nodded towards Daniel. His meaning was apparent even though he hadn't said a word. "See, I'm strong." "Ah, this kid is really cocky." Provocation, absolute provocation. "Ha, interesting fellow." A stream of exclamations came out of mouths of the human targets and night students. When they saw that Han Sha-Oh hadn't been caught, they took things one step further and struck ridiculous poses themselves, further heightening general interest. Even a few night students who had been negotiating prices with some other human targets temporarily halted their conversations and focused their attention on Han Sha-Oh. "Kid, how dare you insult me? I'm gonna get you today." Daniel's face burned bright red like a spontaneously enraged bull. The night students standing around him were his sources of fortune. Daniel's fury was utterly inflamed by such naked humiliation. Judging from the way he looked, he had most likely long forgotten Jeff's words of caution. As Daniel spoke, his eyes spat out fire and his hands formed fists of iron as he glared vehemently at Han Sha-Oh. He brought them crashing down toward Han Sha-Oh, wanting to violently damage Han Sha-Oh's body instead of grabbing him. To outsiders, this punch was worlds apart from Daniel's previous action, whether in terms of speed or strength. This indicated that Daniel was truly furious this time. If Han Sha-Oh was really hit, he would be gravely injured, if not dead outright. Those who had previously paid attention to the proceedings out of the kindness of their hearts started to worry for Han Sha-Oh again. Seeing that the attack was about to reach him, Han Shu pushed off his heels and twisted his body, somehow miraculously dodging Daniel's iron fist's attack. When Daniel struck him dead, his body followed through the action and stumbled forward a good distance. The human targets in his path who had been watching the show all scrambled backwards in panic, fearful of being embroiled in the mess. Han Sha-Oh, on the other hand, had created circles in front of his chest with his two arms, pointing his fists upwards and puffing out his chest. With a trace of a disdainful smile at the corner of his lips, he had once again struck a provocative bodybuilder pose. A string of astounded noises suddenly emitted from the onlookers. The night students originally had the attitude of watching a good show started unconsciously treating Han Sha-Oh seriously. The first evasion could perhaps be explained as a fluke, but Han Sha-Oh still successfully dodged Daniel's Daniel's attacks after the latter had increased the speed and strength of his iron fists. This could no longer be explained by luck. As everyone was marveling in astonishment, Daniel was like a crazy violent beast. His eyes bloodshot, his body shot forward again like the wind, accompanied by a roar of rage, reaching out with both hands and seeking to smash Han Shao into pulp. Miracles kept materializing as Han Shao kept avoiding Daniel's attacks. He was as cunning as a fish and his speed exceedingly swift as well. He even had the breathing space to continuously strike all sorts of bizarre and unique bodybuilding poses. Han Shao's actions were absolutely a naked provocation and outrageous flaunting. Wow, he's so strong. Those insulting poses never repeat. I've never seen anything like it. A female knight exclaimed in surprise. This kid's a bit strong. A male knight student exclaimed in surprise. Daniel's in a spot of trouble this time. A mountain of flesh exclaimed in surprise. The entire lobby was in an uproar. Chapter 24. First bucket of gold. Damn it, I'm going to kill you. Daniel roared explosively. He was thoroughly crazed and began to attack Han Shao fiercely as if he was going to drag Han Shao down to hell with him. But Han Shao was like a sturdy canoe in the middle of a furious ocean. It seemed like it would capsize at any moment, but it somehow resolutely clung on unharmed. By now everyone fully acknowledged Han Shao's evasion speed. No one thought that Han Shao's previous dodges had been out of luck now. Those who had been worried about him now wore carefree smiles. Even Jeff crossed his arms and was laughing merrily as he looked over. Finally, Daniel ran out of energy and stopped automatically, panting heavily. He angrily glared at Han Shao with sweat dripping down like rain, roaring, "Kid, take one of my hits if you have the guts to. What's the use in only dodging?" Daniel had only meant to vent an angry complaint. Even he didn't think that Han Shao would take a hit, but surprisingly Han Shao stopped his various bodybuilding poses and had the presence of mind to nod at Daniel, smiling. No problem. Everyone revisited their opinions of Han Shao after this response, with many displaying perplexed expressions. Han Shao's body was thin and small, so it was understandable that he was nimble and agile, but no one believed that the frail Han Shao with no fighting aura could hold his own in terms of strength against Daniel, an obvious muscle man. Even Daniel himself was gobsmacked by Han Shao's response. He swiftly recovered and laughed wildly. Good. You're the one who wants to die. You can't blame me. Daniel had always been proud of his strong body and ferocious strength. This had formed the basis of his earned power. Although it rankled his pride, Daniel could grudgingly accept that his speed and nimbleness didn't measure up to Han Shao's. Now that a chance to display his awesome strength was in front of him, it was up to him to see if he could wipe away the previous humiliation with one blow. Daniel was naturally going to take full advantage of this opportunity. Gathering up his strength, Daniel propelled his right fist forward. The veins on his arm popped out as he increased his speed and strength to the limit, bring his fist crashing down on Han Shao. Han Shao squinted his eyes a bit, a sinister coldness sparkling in their depths. They were like those of a viper lying in wait for its prey, giving the feeling of poised cruelness. As Daniel's fist came flying towards his face, Han Shao concentrated his magical yuan into his tightly clenched right fist and punched outwards in a head-on collision course with Daniel's iron fist. Pa! Daniel emitted a devastating scream like a pig being slaughtered as a crisp sound rang out. His entire right arm drooped, and the right fist that had been tightly clenched moments earlier was now curled in the shape of a chicken's claw, shaking madly with his right arm. The severeness within Han Shao's eyes faded away and a harmless smile reappeared on his face. He retracted the right fist that he'd just thrust out and shook his right arm slightly, looking at his fist in shock. He muttered to himself, I really took the hit." Daniel had put all his strength into that hit despite seeing Han Shao's weak body. This wasn't simply teaching Han Shao a lesson but wanting to give him a death sentence, but the current Han Shao was no longer a timid coward who dumbly accepted everything that flew his way. Although he sometimes played dumb, he naturally wouldn't be kind to someone who wanted to actually kill him. The bizarre outcome of their two fists meeting had completely stunned the lobby full of night students and human targets. A few of the nearby commoner human targets looked at Han Shao now with just a trace of fear in their gazes. The people next to him automatically automatically shied away, leaving the prime spot for him. All the night students were extremely excited and put their heads together in discussion. Some even suspected that Han Sha-O was one of the rare barbarians on the continent or an orc that had taken human form. Daniel was still wailing in pain as his right arm trembled continuously. Everyone understood what that crisp crack just now had meant. Daniel's right arm was most likely destroyed and useless. The old errand boy Jeff looked at Daniel regretfully and spoke soft words of comfort. "Daniel, I'm sorry that this happened, but I'm afraid that your current body condition has disqualified you from staying here." Daniel involuntarily looked at Han Sha-O in resentment upon hearing Jeff's words. He then brushed past Han Sha-O and walked out of the lobby. Too many previous injuries had resulted from fights, thus a few rules had been laid down. Daniel understood his place and position. Add to that his clear understanding that he was no match for Han Sha-O. His only option was to leave early. When Daniel had left, Jeff gave a great yell. All right, everyone can continue your negotiations." Multiple night students walked toward Han Sha-O as soon as Jeff called out. All of them had fixed their gazes on him and were shouting, "1 gold coin, 2 gold coins, 3 gold coins." Under normal circumstances, according to their respective strength, a commoner human target could be hired for student practice for 10 to 50 silvers. Warriors with high potential could be hired for 1 to 5 gold coins depending on their level. The 2 or 3 gold coins that these people were offering were amazingly high amounts. Although Han Sha-O had displayed his power just now, he still wasn't a warrior. A stronger warrior would have been able to use his fighting aura to deal a single fatal blow to Daniel in the fight just now. Therefore a price of 2 or 3 golds was an incredible price for a commoner human target. Han Sha-O had been ready to accept when the first student had called out 1 gold coin, but when the subsequent price of 2 gold coins had appeared, Han Sha-O shut his mouth with an audible click and awaited higher offers. Although he wasn't here for money, Han Sha-O fully understood that money was just as important in this world as it was on Earth. He would definitely not settle for earning only 1 gold coin when he could earn 2. The night students all walked up to Han Sha-O and called out increasingly higher bids. However, Han Sha-O was still a commoner and not a warrior with surpassing strength. Therefore these people mostly stopped after 2 or 3 gold coins, 5 gold coins. Han Sha-O's patience had won a large sum for him. A handsome sergeant knight with golden curls, one who looked kind and humble, offered a price higher than the others. Most stopped bidding as soon as his offer of 5 gold coins appeared. They looked at him askance and one of them said, "Lawrence, a sergeant warrior is only worth 5 gold coins. Although this kid's a bit strong, he's definitely not worth 5 gold. Isn't your price a bit high?" Lawrence smiled and said placidly, "It's a bit high, but we've come a bit late and all of the good warriors have been hired anyway. There aren't many left, so we can only choose him." The others agreed as they pondered his words. Out of all the human targets left in the lobby, Han Sha-O's strength was most likely the highest. If the warriors who had been here earlier were still here, then perhaps Han Sha-O wouldn't have been worth this much, but now that he was the strongest here, the night students didn't have much choice. People were also impatient to find a sparring partner, thus further increasing Han Sha-O's worth. "How does 5 gold coins sound to this amazing friend?" Lawrence smiled at Han Sha-O and asked peacefully. Han Sha-O realized that no one would continue to bid higher after looking around, and then proceeded to size up Lawrence as the strongest out of those present. He nodded. "I accept. My name is Lawrence and here's 5 gold coins. I hope you can help me in our training later." Lawrence walked toward Han Sha-O and took 5 gold coins out of a colorful pouch. Han Sha-O was a bit emotional as he accepted the 5 gold coins. Brian had been sold to the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force for 5 gold coins back in the day. These 5 gold coins he earned for sparring with a night student were enough to buy back Brian's life. 5 gold coins was a heavenly price for Han Sha-O's current position. It was enough for his freedom. "I'm called Brian, nice to meet you." Han Sha-O smiled urbanely at his fortune god Lawrence after he'd put the gold coins into his own ragged money pouch. "Come with me and let me see if you're worth those 5 gold coins." Lawrence walked out decisively with Han Sha-O following close behind. The training fields of the School of Martial Arts were quite similar to those of the School of Magic. However, The corners were filled with obstacles instead of magical items. There was only Han Shao and Lawrence in the spacious training field. The ground was tiled with rough hard rock and the surface was extremely hard to the touch. Lawrence changed into an athletic white training uniform after entering the venue. He disarmed his sword, placing it to the side. Only then did he look at Han Shao with some interest, smiling. "Those 5 gold coins aren't turned easily. Are you ready?" Han Shao inwardly thought that his body was worlds apart in toughness and strength from the original Brian, thanks to the forging from the magical yuan. Add to that the magical yuan's curious negating effect against fighting aura, and he wasn't that afraid of Lawrence damaging his body with fighting aura. There wasn't much to prepare, so he nodded at Lawrence. "Remember your sparring and thus can only dodge or block but cannot attack." It seemed that Lawrence could tell that Han Shao was new at this and issued some reminders before beginning. He only started slowly walking towards Han Shao when he was satisfied that Han Shao understood. Just as Lawrence was about to reach Han Shao's side, his speed suddenly increased like lightning. His empty left hand was like a sharp sword being unsheathed, and it came rushing toward Han Shao's chest. His fingers were arranged together and pointed toward Han Shao. Due to training, his fighting aura and knight's strength and speed were completely beyond the realm of an ordinary burly commoner if he activated his fighting aura. Lawrence's onrushing hand was more than 10 times the speed and strength of Claude's from earlier. Han Shao's eyes lost focus as he saw that Lawrence's hand was already near his chest. His heart spasmed in fright as his magical yuan started churning quickly. Han Shao abruptly twisted his body and dodged to the side. Lawrence slashed open the front of Han Shao's shirt with a clear ripping sound. Han Shao felt a cold draft on his chest and saw his shirt flying away in the breeze. He felt relieved that he had managed to dodge in time. However, a large amount of force surged into his lower abdomen while Han Shu was still inwardly celebrating. His body involuntarily staggered backwards as he sat down on the hard rock. His intestines and stomach felt like they'd been smashed together and it hurt quite a bit. He lifted his head to see that Lawrence's extended foot was still halted in midair. The student was looking at Han Shao with a bantering look. "Brian, I pulled my punches this time and didn't keep attacking. I won't be as kind next time." Lawrence's kick just now had been infused with fighting aura. However, Lawrence had only employed his fighting aura to increase his body and attack speed and had kept it contained within his body. He hadn't projected the fighting aura into Han Shao's body for further damage. And it was because of this that the magical yuan within Han Shao's body hadn't reacted. His physical body had taken the collision that had been filled with a crazy amount of strength. Even his improved body had taken damage. He nodded with his brows drawn tightly together. Han Shao gritted his teeth against the pain from his stomach and stood up from the ground. He looked at Lawrence coldly. "I'll be more careful from now on." Again. Chapter 25. Pain and Happiness. Lawrence looked at Han Shao with some surprise, then smiled and said, "Very good." His body abruptly moved again and he appeared in front of Han Shao in the blink of an eye. He violently kicked out with his foot using lightning-like speed, still aiming for Han Shao's stomach. Han Shao had already taken a hefty kick to the stomach at this point in time and was in an exceeding amount of pain. He was well aware that Sergeant Knight Lawrence's attack speed and strength was not something that someone who hadn't even surpassed the solid realm of demonic practice could fully defend against. But for some reason, Han Shao was wholly unafraid and even felt a bit of eager anticipation. The magical yuan within his body circulated through his abdomen a few times and he felt a quick abatement of pain. He concentrated like he never had before and faced Lawrence's subsequent attacks calmly. Just as Lawrence's foot came flying his way, Han Shao's feet had already pushed off and he backed up with haste, evading Lawrence's foot like lightning. However, Lawrence wasn't surprised in the least and his body didn't hesitate. He followed his empty kick with a string of punches and kicks following Han Shao's retreat and ferociously continued to attack Han Shao. Lawrence was a sergeant level knight and could increase his body functions beyond a typical muscle man when he circulated his fighting aura to his energy and attack power. Even with Han Shao's current agility, he still couldn't avoid being repeatedly hit. Pilla sounded continuously as Han Shao could only fully protect his face. That left his chest, waist, stomach, arms and legs to suffer constant hits. The pain in his body increased as he started being hit multiple times. His evasion speed became more sluggish due to his overall body condition. He was hit with more attacks this way, and towards the end his two legs were as heavy as lead and each movement required a monumental amount of effort. If it wasn't for the fact that Han Shao had been constantly practicing magic and strengthening his body during this time, then based off Brian's weak and fragile body he would have been dead within a minute of Lawrence's storm of attacks. When he'd faced Claude and Eric, both had sent their fighting aura directly into Han Shao's body. The wild fighting aura had been enclosed by the magical yuan as soon as it had entered his body, preventing Han Shao's body from suffering from too much damage. Han Shao hadn't been seriously injured the two times he'd been hit by fighting aura, causing him to slightly overlook the warriors at night, but now that he'd been subjected to such a thorough beating by Lawrence, Han Shao finally understood how he'd been completely wrong before. He hadn't been hurt before purely due to the wondrous effects of the magical yuan. If it wasn't for the magical yuan, then his internal organs would have most likely have been completely destroyed as soon as the fighting aura entered his body. No wonder Claude was so taken aback when Han Shao hadn't immediately died a grisly death when Claude sent his fighting aura into Han Shao's body. This also explained why Eric confidently thought that Han Shao was dead without a doubt and didn't even bother checking Han Shao's body. Lawrence used his fighting aura in a different way and didn't send it directly into Han Shao's body to wreak havoc on his internal organs. On the contrary, Lawrence used it to increase the speed and strength of his attacks. This prevented the wondrous effects of the magical yuan and forced Han Shao to passively take the hits with his physical body. Pa! The same foot stomped on Han Shao's stomach again and Han Shao staggered backwards in retreat. He finally couldn't handle anymore and once more fell heavily to the ground. The current Han Shao had 2 broken ribs and numerous other injuries. Apart from his unharmed face, his entire body had suffered severe hits as it never had before. Han Shao struggled with his body and kept trying to stand up, but would wobble back to the ground every time he tried. Each twist and movement of his body brought him great pain, but Han Shao actually felt ecstasy at this moment. He could clearly feel that the magical yuan was circulating at a speed much faster than normal and kept flowing through all his aches and pains, creating a strange fiery sensation where his bones had been broken and wounds had been opened. Han Shao understood that his previous conclusion had been correct. The fastest way to break through the solid realm was to break things. The magical yuan's abnormal circulations now continually repaired his broken body and reforged his tendons, bones, muscles and skin over and over again, causing his physical body to become tougher. Although his body hurt beyond belief, Han Shao was quite satisfied. He grit his teeth and yelled brokenly while laughing grimly. He finally scrambled to his feet and stared at Lawrence in the eye. I think our partnership can be continued for a long time. Lawrence stopped and stood in front of Han Shao, frowning as he watched the latter struggle to his feet after falling again and again. As the attacker, Lawrence was well aware of the force of his attacks just now. Even an ordinary companion at arms with the benefit of defending with fighting aura would not be able to take the hits like Han Shao stubbornly did. What surprised Lawrence the most was that even after suffering these fierce attacks, Han Shao could still laugh loudly in between screams of pain. Lawrence could hear from Han Shao's laughs that the latter truly seemed to be filled with joy. Lawrence thought this was simply too incredible. When Han Shao had mentioned a long-term partnership, Lawrence was dumbfounded at first but then smiled lightly. Brian, you're quite interesting, but a long-term partnership depends on your body and whether it can handle more attacks. To be honest, I haven't fully exerted myself today, nor have I used my sword. I have coins in abundance. If you still want to earn this money, you can come find me anytime. I will still offer the same price of 5 golds per session. What do you think? Han Shao nodded and responded, no problem, I'll be back soon. Good. Brian, you're very interesting fellow. I hope you can recover quickly. My attacks next time will be even more vicious. Be prepared. Lawrence said as he changed out of his clothes, rearmed himself with his sword and left the training field. Han Shao didn't leave immediately after Lawrence had departed. He instead sat down Indian style and repeatedly circulated manipulated the magical yuan according to the principles of practicing magic, reforging his severely damaged body. After a while he felt his drained energy slowly revive after repeated circulations of the magical yuan. His legs that felt like they weighed a ton also gradually regained some strength. Although he still hurt all over, pain seemed to be better than the complete lifelessness he had felt earlier. He grimaced as he moved, sensing the pain he was in. Honshu laughed loudly, holding up underneath the unending agony. He slowly stood up, then swaggered out of the training field. "Oh, it's Brian, are you alright?" Honshu heard others gasp in amazement as soon as he walked out of the training field. Upon swiveling his body he realized that it was the kind-hearted young warrior Cal, the one who had tried to talk Honshu out of it in the lobby. Cal's tight robes had some dust on it and some traces of sweat beaded his forehead, but he seemed otherwise unharmed. "No big deal." Honshu smiled at Cal and responded faintly while nodding his head. Cal was a seasoned warrior and could tell with one glance that Honshu was not as unaffected as he said he was. Cal had a great deal of experience as a human target and naturally understood that even if nothing showed in outward appearances, that didn't necessarily mean that the body was unharmed. The way that Honshu was walking and his expression all indicated that his body condition was quite bad. Cal quickly walked toward Honshu and reached out a hand to help steady Honshu. Cal frowned. "What, no big deal? Your body must be in awful shape. Here, let me take you back." "Good thing you walked out alive. I thought you'd be beaten to death in there." Cal meant well, but Honshu was an errand boy for the necromancy major, and a crazy one at that. If he were to return with Cal, it was bound to create unnecessary complications. Besides, Honshu didn't want to owe anyone favors. Even though he felt terrible, he had to hold it in. He would be fine if he walked slowly. Therefore Honshu brushed off Cal's steadying hand and smiled. "Thank you, California. I'm fine really. I can go back by myself." Honshu turned to leave immediately after his words, but saw a familiar figure approaching from afar. Claude. A human target followed behind Claude, and they both approached the night student training fields. It looked like he was also here to spar with human targets. Honshu had been prepared to bump into Claude when he came to the school for nights. The last time at the Department of Light Magic, Honshu's little skeleton had almost been pulverized by Claude, and he himself had suffered from Claude's fighting aura as well. If it wasn't for the magical yuan enclosing the fighting aura, he would most likely be dead by now. Claude had long since forgotten this matter and didn't know that the Honshu was the master of the little skeleton, but Honshu had already noted this event for future revenge. Even though he was prepared to see Claude again, his body condition was at its worst at the moment, and Honshu had no desire to go head to head with Claude right now. If he'd guessed wrong and Claude was still harboring a grudge from last time, death was the only possible outcome for Honshu if Claude took his revenge. Honshu's mind frantically raced through ways to avoid Claude as the latter approached with a sunny smile, turning his head to hold a spirited conversation with other night students.